Okay, we're live with a whole 3 minutes to spare, so um, we can just wait a few minutes.
That's not gonna work.
All right, Mayor Smith,
Yes.
we are ready to go when you are. Yep.
All right. Looks like. All right. Looks like I got everybody. So I'll go ahead and call the September 1st, 2020 Oxford City Council meeting to order. May I, Ms. Eaton, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Pruthridge,
Here.
Ms. Ragu,
Here.
Mr. Snavely,
I'm here.
Ms. Southard,
Here.
Mr. Bracken.
Here.
Mr. Ellerby,
Here.
Mayor Smith.
Here. Okay. Then I have a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
I'll second.
Moved by Councilor Southard, second by Councilor Snavely. All right. First tonight on our agenda for public participation is our annual report from the Police Community Relations and Review Commission. So I will turn that over to the chair, Patrick Mead.
Thank you very much. Thanks for letting me come and present this. Before I start, I want to thank the members of the PCRRC. I don't know if everyone knows who they are, but our vice chair is Deirdre DeLong. And then we have members Amber Franklin, Amin Wang, Larry Nadler, Egon Kron, and Hannah Story. And these volunteers have really done a good job this year. Obviously, policing has become a hot topic, and the members of this commission have worked very hard and taken this very seriously, this role upon themselves to try to help Oxford and the community and the police department. And it's an honor to work with them, really. So for the yearly report, I emailed you all a copy. It'll be public record. We put it on our webpage. Any citizen can read it. I will not bore people with going through the summary of we had 5 meetings this year. We are required to have 4. We had 1 extra after the George Floyd murder, and use that really as a way for the community to give input. And that was really very helpful. So what I'd rather concentrate on is our goals, what we hope to do in the future. And we wrote these goals in June and July. Most of them were written before the Black Lives Matter group in Oxford presented you with a proposal. And then after I go through the goals, I can give you the commission's response to some of those proposals from the Black Lives Matter group. So our first goal has been the goal we've had every year, and that was increased communication with the African-American community and other demographic groups in the community about their perception of policing. And every year this is a goal, and we make a little progress, but I believe in the last couple of months, we've actually made some real progress on that. We would also like council to help us to join an organization called the National Association for Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement. It's a national organization made up of commissions and boards that oversee law enforcement in their cities. It's a whopping $400 fee for the commission to join and have access to information and seminars and webinars and such. And I think as this commission becomes more important, if the volunteers on the commission want to access some of that information and become better informed and more knowledgeable, that's a good thing, I believe. Our third goal was to look at the actual ordinance regarding how the commission deals with complaints that are placed before it. I think what we have found is the city's very glad we have a police commission when all this hit this summer. And there's a place for our community to kind of process this, to take information, to bring ideas for improvements in policing and community relations. And it turns out we were very proactive and had a lot of foresight in establishing this years ago. When you look at our complaint process, we've never had a complaint appealed to us. That may happen, and it may be a serious situation. And I would like to look at the ordinance and see if we really are equipped for the review part of police community relations and review commission. I do not think the ordinance equips us to deal with this in a way that would handle a really strong or a really serious incident. And so that's a goal of ours, is to look at that ordinance. That's on our November agenda, actually. We'd also like to improve the complaint process itself and remove barriers to enable anonymous submissions. Obviously, the Black Lives Matter group brought forth similar things about removing barriers. But I know anytime someone submits a complaint, it becomes public record, and there's questions about how to respond to that, since all that's public record, and you all just listened to an hour presentation about responding to emails and such. So that's something that we would like to do, though, remove some of those complaints, including remove barriers to complaints, including having to have complaints notarized. We feel that puts a barrier for certain demographics to overcome that, to file a formal complaint. And I realize that's in the contract, but I think that's something we got to look at. We'd also like to obtain data about pedestrian stops, bicycle stops, what we call field contacts, the reasons for those, and the data broken down by officers. And again, this was another thing brought forth by the Black Lives Matter group about gathering more data. This is something we've been asking for since 2017, I believe, so 3 or 4 years. And hopefully we're making progress on that. And then we'd also are willing to work with City Council on the re-envisioning of policing in Oxford, which really means, are there issues in Oxford, societal issues that we've asked our police to deal with, that really we as a city should deal with differently. So those were our kind of goals for the upcoming year, the things we want to work on. We have a long list of things we're going to put on our agenda to relook at training, because some of our members haven't gone through looking at the police training about de-escalation, crisis intervention. We want to recontact with women helping women that we contacted with in the first year we were in existence. We want to deal with officer wellness because police under such pressure and stress, and particularly in these days, probably feel somewhat unappreciated. And we want to make sure that the department has things in there to take care of their officers, to make sure that they are well, et cetera. So there's a lot we have on our agenda. Hopefully the report is something you read through, and if you have any questions, you're more than welcome to ask. And if the public has questions, they can email someone on the commission, and we'll all be on the website. So unless you have questions, and you want me to, I can go on and let you know how we dealt with the proposals from the Black Lives Matter group.
All right.
Keep going.
Yeah, keep going.
Okay, all right. So we met last month and looked at 2 of the 3 proposals from Black Lives Matter. The first was the thing on field contacts, pedestrian stops and reasons for them. And since this is something we've been going back and forth with and kind of been asking for years, we took a formal vote on that to make a recommendation to the Oxford Police Department, a recommendation to the City Council. And what we voted was that the OPD provide the PCRRC and the community with data on field contacts, pedestrian and bicycle stops, including the reasons for the stops. And we basically said, we would like you to take up to 6 months to achieve that. This is something we've been pushing for 3 years. So we took a formal vote to make a formal recommendation and let council know we made that formal recommendation. We are only advisory. Only the city administration or council can require that action. But we've given our advice based on a lot of input and based on the belief that this is something that could be done. We could get this. I think this data would help determine, because it's part of the bias-free policing, would help determine, is there bias or is there not bias? And why are people being stopped and who's being stopped on foot? And I think that would clear up a lot of distrust in the community. I think transparency is good. And the more data we provide the community, they would say, well, the police department, the city has nothing to hide. They're willing to give us this data to let us know who stopped, why they're stopped, and then the racial and ethnic breakdown of who's being stopped. So that was a formal vote we took to recommend that that be done. I personally think 6 months is plenty of time. I'm not an IT person. I think it could be done quicker, but that's an administration thing. We did not take a vote on the second proposal, which was about removing barriers to police misconduct. We did not do that because what we saw was some effort, particularly by Jessica Green and Chief Jones, to improve the process. They presented 2 things on the website. Obviously, there's legal issues with anything put on the website. It's automatically public record. And we thought there's already an effort by the OPD to respond to this recommendation. We didn't need to make a formal push. And what the Black Lives Matter group wanted was a card. Well, our officers all have cards and they all give them out sometimes. And what we talked about in that meeting was adding either a QR code or a website URL to the bottom, to the back of the officer's card that would indicate, here's where you can get feedback about this stop. And so citizens would get the card every time they were stopped. I know New York City does this. And on that card is information where they can get feedback. And so they can immediately, through the QR code or whatever, provide feedback, positive or negative, about their experience at the stop. We think that's really doable. It seemed, my understanding in the discussion was that Jessica Green and the chief thought that was doable, and it's something that was going to be moved forward with without us sort of make it a formal recommendation. In the 5 years we've worked on this, we haven't made many formal recommendations by votes. It's sort of been a consensus thing. I felt we had consensus on the second issue, and the city was moving forward on it, and we didn't need to take a formal vote. If it turns out we're incorrect and there is no movement forward, we can take a formal vote and make a formal recommendation to you all and ask you all to put more pressure on that. I don't think we need to do that. The one thing, as I've already mentioned, is a barrier to complaints is a formal complaint has to be notarized. That's in the contract. The contract is what, 2 or 3 more years? I think it would be really great if the Oxford Police Officer Union would just come to the city council and say, we're willing to enter into a memorandum of understanding and remove that barrier. Because we, the police officers of Oxford, want to be transparent and open, want our citizens to feel we're accessible, don't want our citizens to feel we got this barrier in their way. But I guess unless the union does that, either you can ask for a memorandum of understanding or you got to wait till the contract's renewed. But I think that's something that in good faith could be worked out, even though that wasn't part of the Black Lives Matter proposal. They just wanted those cards. I think that's doable. The third proposal about alternatives to traditional policing, we did not get to. The meeting was at 9:30 at night. We're dealing with volunteers. It was late. It's a large subject that would require a lot of conversation. And so what we're going to do is meet September 17th in a few weeks. Jessica's shaking her head no. Hopefully we can meet September 17th in 2 weeks. We'll find a monitor and discuss that third proposal and come back to city council with a recommendation, unless you all have some input for us to do something differently. And Jessica's shaking her head no. So that's sort of
Talk
my
about
report.
scheduling later, it's fine.
Okay, all right. So if you have any questions, I'll be glad to take them. Or as I used to say to my students, questions, comments, or smart remarks. We'll take any.
Thank you for your service, Pat. I really appreciate what you do, and your commission. All of them, I think, take it very seriously, and they're doing a great job.
They really do. It's a great group.
Yeah, I want to echo what Councilor Snavely said. I know there is an awful lot on a volunteer commission's shoulders right now, and we do appreciate it. And I just want everybody who's listening to this to know that we take your recommendations very seriously, and we will continue to look at them, and we are working on enacting them. So we are glad that you were there. We are glad to be working with you. So thank you for everything. Thank you for your report.
Thank
And
you.
that wraps it up for now. Okay. We are going to move on to public comments for anyone wishing to address council about items that are not on the agenda or on the consent agenda. If you could please state your name and address for the record. Mrs. Green, is there anybody wishing to address council? All right.
Yes, to those of you who are new to Zoom, if you want to speak, click the raise your hand button at the bottom of your screen. And if you're a dial-in, you can press *9. I see one, Mr. Chandler, go ahead.
Thanks. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay. My name is Justin Chandler, and as of last Friday, I am now a resident of Cincinnati, but I lived in Oxford for 5 years, and I'm currently still a PhD student at Miami University. I'm also a member of Black Lives Matter, Oxford, Ohio, and I helped to draft the letter that was presented to the PCRC and City Council that Pat Mead just discussed. I want to start by thanking Pat Mead, the PCRC, Chief Jones, and City Council, and Mayor Smith for being willing to listen to the concerns of Oxford citizens. I have a few thoughts I'd like to share regarding PCRC's recommendations. So for Proposal 1, require comprehensive reporting, I'm glad to see PCRC recommending that the City Council request field contacts or pedestrian stops from OPD, and that those be reported within the next 6 months. But I think 6 months is just too long to wait. When the PCRC first started, pedestrian stop data was something, as Pat Mead mentioned, that several Oxford citizens had requested. And years later, that data is still yet to be seen. So I think the citizens of Oxford have been patient. I think that given this fact that the information is so long in coming, now more than ever, a quicker window just needs to be implemented. I think if we really value transparency in our institutions, a 3-month window is still very realistic. It's plenty of time for OPD to provide that information. And so I urge the members of City Council to request that said data be reported to PCRC within the next 3 months, at least by the end of the year. Again, I just think 6 months is too long to wait. And then regarding proposal 2, remove barriers to reporting police misconduct. Although I appreciate PCRC hearing us out on that, I was disappointed that they were not able to reach a decision about whether to offer a formal recommendation. I appreciate the progress made on the police complaint and commendation form on the city's website that Jessica Green and Chief Jones are working on. But at the end of the day, not everyone's going to know about the website. So in other words, what that means is some Oxford citizens won't know what recourse they have when they experience police misconduct. And that is a problem. That's precisely why the proposal in our letter specifically requests that OPD do the following. And so I'm quoting directly from the letter, which we presented to City Council August 4th. For all stops, require police officers to give civilians their name, badge number, reason for the stop, and a card with instructions for filing a complaint with the Police Community Relations and Review Commission, PCRC. So including this information about filing a complaint or commendation on officer business cards and mandating that officers hand these out at each stop is a key step toward removing the barriers to reporting police misconduct. It also informs Oxford citizens that they have recourse in the event of experience misconduct. So currently OPD already has these business cards, as Pat Mead mentioned. Updating them would require a minor revision to ensure they include information about how to file a complaint or commendation, along with a link and a QR code that both redirect to a form that will be submitted to PCRC. I think revising the business cards would take very little time to implement, but would go a really long way toward promoting community awareness. And asking the officers then hand out these cards at stops doesn't just mean it will be easier for people to file a complaint or a commendation. It means that OPD can offer valuable proof that they truly want to promote open lines of communication in Oxford. And I think that's something that Chief Jones has repeatedly expressed he does want. So I'd really like to see this implemented. So with that in mind, and given the fact that institutions are very slow to change, and that without a formal recommendation, we may find Oxford citizens asking for these business cards 5 years from now, I really want to see something happen. So I request that City Council return proposal 2 to the PCRC for further deliberation at their next regularly scheduled quarterly meeting in November. It's my hope that at that meeting, PCRC will have more time to attend to the specifics of the proposal and to come to a decision about its value to the citizens of Oxford. Thank you all again.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have Ms. Rosenberg. Go ahead, Ms. Rosenberg.
Thank you. Shauna Rosenberg, 1036 Arrowhead Drive in Oxford. I am here to also speak on the PCRC's recommendations to council. So I definitely want to thank Pat and the rest of the commission for taking seriously the Black Lives Matter proposals that were presented to council last month. So first of all, I just want to thank City Council for their consistent attention to police reform in our city. The recent change to the dereliction of duty code, which bans use of chokeholds and requires officers to prevent excessive or unauthorized use of force by other officers, was definitely an improvement over what the city had before. And then I really appreciate that you took seriously the initiatives of Black Lives Matter and had the PCRC look at those proposals. I want to echo Justin Chandler and say that when I was on the police commission back in 2016, we started to talk about wanting field contact data in order to determine whether there was any kind of implicit bias in Oxford Police Department. I see that it's 2020, and that is something that we are still asking for. And so I wish to echo Justin in saying that I would like to see City Council recommend that 3 months instead of 6 months be the time frame for Chief Jones and the Oxford Police Department to start providing field contact data. I think that's very important for transparency's sake, and to better understand if disenfranchised groups in the city are being policed well, or if there could be some improvement there. And then I actually had a lot written out about the second proposal with business cards, but that has been addressed quite a bit already. So I will just say that it is actually an action item in Obama's 21st Century Policing Task Force report that was published in 2015, specifically for business cards to have information printed on them that could be passed out, that has information on how to commend or complain about police conduct. So just to sum up, I'm skipping a lot of stuff, like I said, but I believe that comprehensive reporting about field contacts with pedestrians and others outside of arrests and traffic stops is important to have a better understanding about the possibility of implicit bias in our police force. I also believe that removing barriers from the complaint process will help members of disenfranchised groups feel more comfortable about reporting their concerns with how they are policed by OPD. I appreciate that as a council, you've demonstrated your belief that we can improve the transparency and accountability of our police department. And I hope to
On the
continue to
windowsill.
see positive change in this direction.
In the living
Thank you
room.
for your time.
Thank you.
Somebody needs to mute.
I think that was Mr. Chandler, and he's muted.
Sorry about that. Next we have Ms. Shaman. Ms. Shaman, go ahead. Ms. Shaman, I think you're still muted. If you want to unmute, please.
Thanks, my apologies. Amy Shaman, 11 Heather Ridge Court here in Oxford. I also want to thank the Police Citizens Review Commission for all of their volunteer work, and thank Chief Jones for being willing to be a part of this process. And in very brief form, to echo what has already been said, I am not formally a member of the Oxford Black Lives Matter group, but I echo many of their concerns and their suggestions. And I too appreciate City Council's willingness to hear these issues and to support the work of the commission. And I also agree that having opportunities to make anonymous reports to the police is very, very important, even if there's some statement on that form that says, if you choose to have this report be anonymous, it may not be able to go all the way to disciplinary hearings, but it will be heard by the police, or whatever the appropriate way to frame that legally is, because it's very important that people feel like they have a voice and that they're not risking their safety by using that voice, especially in today's environment. So thank you.
Thank you.
Next we have Ms. Franklin. Ms. Franklin, go ahead.
Thank you. Amber Franklin, 1211 Dana Drive. I want to thank Pat Mead for being such an excellent chair of the PCRRC, and also Chief Jones for working with us, and right now really for the community. I want to thank the community for pushing us, because when you have a commission that's based on relations and review, it can sometimes be a bit of a tightrope. And outside of the events that happened this summer, although these events in terms of anti-Black police violence have been happening since the creation of the commission, but the renewed attention this summer has caused the community to really push us in ways that are challenging but positive. And so I want to thank the community for their attention there. I want to echo what Mr. Mead said about City Council supporting the commission belonging to the National Association for Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement. I had joined that commission myself just as a paid member. I couldn't really continue that year after year out of my own pocket, but it was helpful They provide webinars and all sorts of information that I think would make us a stronger commission. But another thing that I think would be really helpful is if we had a member of City Council who was an advisory member to the commission. I think there's a lot of mentoring that should happen when a commission is new. Even just sitting in on the Sunshine Law presentation today was very helpful. But I think if there was somebody assigned to the commission as an advisory role, we would be able to be more effective in the future in knowing how and when to make recommendations, what to expect from City Council, and the like. So thank you, City Council, for being so attentive to this matter.
All right. Thank you. Great suggestion.
Okay, next we have Miss Marsh. Miss Marsh, go ahead.
Hi, my name's Lexi Marsh. Address is 49 Spartan Drive. I would really like to thank the Police Commission. I think having them here today really established the fact that they've been in existence before we thought we would need them. So to have them to call on now instead of starting from ground zero and figuring out how we can begin dialogue between community members and the police is so important. It's what really makes me proud to live in a town like Oxford, that we're ahead of the game so that when we experience what we've experienced over the summer and really need someone to talk to, the Police Commission has been there. So thank you to the Police Commission and the City Council.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have Mr. Cron. Mr. Cron, go ahead.
Yes, hi, Egon Cran, 84 Autumn Drive, Oxford, Ohio. And, I'm a member of PCRC, and I just want to say, to folks that are asking for a 3-month turnaround on, pedestrian stop data. I have worked in data for 18 years of my professional life. 3 months, unless you have a crystal ball, it is unrealistic. And, I just want to say it is an incredibly aggressive deadline to come up with 3 months worth of data, with any data within 3 months and implement a data system that will give you any, well, pretty much anything. So I just want to say, let's set realistic expectations, because collecting data, implementing the system, and reporting on data in 3 months is just not realistic. 6 months, in my opinion, is very, very aggressive even. So, that's all I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next we have Miss Story. Miss Story, go ahead.
Hi, yes, Hannah Story. I live at 626 Brill Drive, apartment 11. Many thanks. I'm also a member of the PCRC. Just wanted to jump on and say thanks to Pat Mead for giving our yearly report, as well as reflecting some of the decisions that we made, or the suggestions that we were making to City Council. And I also wanted to offer support for the suggestion that Dr. Franklin made regarding having an advisory member, because I also learned a lot at the Sunshine Laws work session. And I think that having someone advise as well, I think that will help us more formalize a structure for what we can do, as well as a formal process, even as it relates to what are we going to do with the complaints when they do come in, and our decision making in the future. And I'm the type of person that wants to be forward thinking, so I think that we should be thinking about the movements that could potentially impact us in the future. So I just wanted to offer support, and thanks to Chief Jones and thanks to City Council.
Thank you.
Pat has his hand up.
Yes, Mr. Mead.
Yeah, I'm going to speak as a citizen, not as a member of the Police Community Relations Review on another matter I don't know if it's on the agenda in the future. I understand the city of Oxford's got a hold of some CARES money. And one of the things you're determining is how to spend that CARES money to help with the impact of the COVID virus. And I would like to offer a suggestion, having spent 30 years working with students in Oxford, many of whom did not have much. It's extremely obvious that in this day and age, in a day when they have to do their schooling online at home, their parents have to be home doing things online, and that many people do not have internet access. And I don't know if it's possible for the city to use some of their money to help establish zones in Oxford where there would be internet access, such as Parkview Arms, the Trailer Court, parts of town where maybe people reside who can't access the internet. The internet's become a utility like the roads. Even to apply for unemployment, you gotta every Sunday night reapply on the internet. I know that Cincinnati does this in certain neighborhoods. In Avondale, they have internet that you can tie into. It services about 8,000 people in the Avondale neighborhood in Cincinnati. They have it in Lower Price Hill that services less people. So there are cities providing this in certain neighborhoods where they feel like it would help the citizens. And certainly with COVID, the online schooling and online work puts many of our citizens at a disadvantage. And COVID is sort of going to widen the gap between those who have and those who have not. And I think it is something for the city to think about. How do we establish this utility that's becoming so important in modern life so that our citizens who need access to it, and our young people, students who need access to it, have access to it. I'm not an IT person. I have no idea how that would be done, but obviously it is being done places. And I think it would be good for the city of Oxford to look into how they can provide this for citizens. So with that, I'm signing off. I thank you all for everything. Thank you for everything you do.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm looking for other comments. If anyone else would like to speak at this time, please raise your hand by clicking the button at the bottom of your screen. And I don't see any. Oh, there is one. Sorry, there is one. Miss McLean, go ahead. You're still muted, Miss McLean. There you go. Go ahead.
Are we addressing the CARES portion of the agenda now?
No, we are still in public comments.
So we can wait, Miss McLean, till the end.
Thank you. I was confused.
Okay, thanks. Okay, I don't see any others, Mr. Mayor.
All right, then let's move on to the consent agenda. May I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I so move.
Second?
Seconded.
Second by Councilor Southard. Any items to be removed from the consent agenda tonight? There's only one item on there. Seeing none, Ms. Eaton, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Ragu,
Here.
Mr. Snavely,
Yes.
Ms. Southard,
Yes.
Mr. Bracken,
Yes.
Mr. Ellerby,
Yes.
Mr. Prithridge.
Yes.
Mayor Smith.
Yes. All right, we will move on to resolutions. Ms. Eaton, you may read the first resolution whenever you're ready.
A resolution accepting the rates, the amounts and rates as determined by the Budget Commission of Butler County, Ohio, and authorizing the necessary tax levies and certifying them to the county auditor.
May I have a motion to adopt?
So moved.
Second.
All right, moved by Councilor Southard, second by Councilor Snavely. I'll turn this over to Mr. Newland.
Yes, this is a resolution we do annually. It's actually part of the budgeting process. And the purpose is to legally adopt Oxford property tax rates for next year as approved by the auditor's office. And 3.65 is an inside millage. That always stays the same. The 3.25 mil is for the Oats Trail. And depending on, I know this year they're doing a revaluation, so it won't take effect until 2022. But if property values increase in the city, that tax will actually go down for the individual property owner because it's outside millage and it's based off raising $1,050,000 a year. That's all I have to say about this resolution.
Is there anyone from the public who would like to address this resolution before council?
I do not see any.
All right, council discussion. I see Councilor Ragu's hand raised.
I just have a question, Joe. Like, how the property tax, does it take into account how much the property was recently sold for? I feel like there's such a huge discrepancy between what a property is worth versus how much they're taxed on. So I'm just wondering how that's created.
Right now, they're going through a revaluation process. They have to do it every 6 years. It's a formal one. And they go around town, they take pictures, they look at permits that were pulled on houses if somebody's done an improvement to it. They also look at the value of the house that's sold within the past 3 years, because they do a 3-year update where basically they just look at the sales in the neighborhood and they may adjust the value on the property at that point. But this is the big one that they do every 6 years. The treasurer's office or the auditor's office applied to the state to actually put it off because of COVID-19, but they got nixed on that, so we had to go ahead and finish it. So after they're done, there'll be a process where they'll publish the new values and people have a chance, if they disagree with them, that they can go in front of the auditor and make their case against this agreement.
And if a permit is pulled, then I guess it's obviously worth more. Like, do they know, say a house has 9 people, that each person is paying $1,000 each? Like, does that factor into it or not so much?
They do part of that. They do a hybrid with a rental property. They look at the rental income also on the property. I think the auditor came probably 5 or 6 years ago and explained that process, because he actually owns property in the city of Oxford too. So I hope that explained it well.
Yeah, thanks.
All right. Seeing no other questions, Ms. Eaton, you may call the roll.
Mr. Snavely,
Yes.
Ms. Southard,
Yes.
Mr. Bracken,
Yes.
Mr. Ellerby,
Yes.
Mr. Prithridge,
Yes.
Ms. Ragu,
Yes.
Mayor Smith.
Yes. All right. That resolution is adopted. We'll move on to our second resolution. Ms. Eaton, you may read that whenever you're ready.
A resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into a contract with PAR Public Safety Equipment for the purchase of specified equipment to outfit 3 Ford Interceptor utility vehicles for the police division at a cost not to exceed $32,479.
All right. May I have a motion to adopt.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Prithrick, second by Mr. Snavely. I will turn it over to Chief Jones.
Thank you, Your Honor. In last year, as part of the 2020 capital equipment budget process, the council approved a purchase of 3 police cars. I'm sorry, the council approved a budget of $141,000 for a cruiser replacement. In January of 2020, council then approved the purchase of 3 Ford Explorer police utility vehicles. And we placed that order in January of 2020. So of that 141,000, we spent $96,834. The cars have been in production and are soon to be delivered to us. So now we need to order the equipment to outfit those vehicles. So this will include equipment such as emergency lights, sirens, the prisoner seating area, the computer mounts, the wireless network equipment in the weapons vault. So this contract would allow us to enter into a contract with PAR Public Safety for a price not to exceed $32,479.84. It was on state contract.
All right. Is there anyone from the public who would like to address this resolution before council?
I do not see any.
All right. Council discussion, questions? I see Councilor Ragu's hand.
I know we had chatted about this before as far as the cost savings of not having a 24-hour fleet. I'm wondering if it's possible to provide that data, just because I'm struggling to see a whole lot of evidence based information from other cities. So, or I don't know if you have any of that data you could put together as a cost comparison from before and after.
Sure. I guess I would ask you what data you want. The report that we have is rather, it's older. So, really doing an updated study on that would be helpful, but that just takes a lot, takes some staff time. But what data are you looking for, I guess?
It's more just, whenever the first thought of saying, well, the reason why we don't have a 24-hour fleet is because it is cost saving, which I think everyone likes. I'm just wondering if you could produce that amount of cost savings, like because we don't have a 24-hour fleet, we've actually managed to reduce the amount of money we spend on vehicles by this much every year. I'm wondering if that could be produced so that it could be data driven.
Yeah, we could work on doing something like that, but we haven't had one for many years. So the stats that the data we'd be comparing to would go back several years. So we'd have to kind of compare to maybe other cities or other nearby agencies. But yeah, we could work on a study to do that.
Because I just want to vote on whatever has the most cost saving. So as long as it can be backed up, of course, take the car home. But if that can't be backed up, it's hard to make a justification for it.
Sure.
I just want to say, I don't know if it's the state contract or what, but this looks like great pricing for the outfit package compared to what we've done in the past or what, because I've seen a marked reduction in cost of our police vehicles and their equipment over the past 6 years compared to what we were paying. So I think just what I've seen anecdotally, this looks good.
Well, if I may, just that you asked for another price with the change of the change of ownership and the vendor, that was a good ask because it came down lower. So talk about cost savings, that was good. So thank you.
Yes. Yeah, we'll still have let's see, 32. We'll still have about 12 or 13,000 still in that line that we're coming in under budget. So there will be the additional expense that won't be part of this, that we won't have to come back to council for, will be the striping of the vehicles, the marking of it, but that's minimal cost. But we'll end up leaving money in that budget line item likely.
Let me just comment on the data. Study that the chief was referring to was one that was done, predated me, it was done by the state auditor. We can do that, but we're asking our police chief to collect stop data and this and that. So I can just share with you my personal experience. I was city manager in another community in New England, and we did not have take-home vehicles. I believe we had 6 police cruisers, and every year we purchased 3 because we were a similarly sized police department, and they were constantly being used with no rest. And, so typically if you allow take-home cruisers, you find that police officers take better care of their cruisers because it's theirs and they're expected to clean it. And they have time when they're not working to get it washed, vacuumed out. But if you basically are using them around the clock, I'm not sure you would see a difference. But you know, we can hire a consultant to survey other communities, give you some really good data, but I'm not sure the rest of the council feels the same way. You know, I'd like to hear from the other members if we think that we want to.
Not about spending money on a consultant, but I could imagine for if you adjusted for maybe, let's say if our police force has grown in size, but if you make maybe a certain measurement for the proportion of amount of budget that goes towards vehicles, so trying to take into account inflation over the years from when we used to have a 24-hour fleet compared to what we do now. I can't imagine that would be that hard. I'm sure there's a line item for vehicles for used by the police, is there not?
I'm not sure it's that hard. It's just, you know, we would want to put together a good report. And I think we would want to survey other communities based on their experience. I mean, that would be the basis of the data. Many of the departments in Butler County have take-home vehicles, but I'm sure some do not. So, you know, we can do it, but yeah, I just, as city manager, I have to remind you of all of the things that we're being asked to do. And we want to do a top-notch job on everything that we do. So I just don't want to produce, you know, a report that's not really complete. So that's just my concern.
All right. There are no further questions. Ms. Eaton, you may call the roll.
Ms. Southard,
Yes.
Mr. Bracken, Mr. Ellerby,
Yes.
Mr. Prithridge,
Yes.
Ms. Ragu,
Yes.
Mr. Snavely,
Yes.
Mr. Ellerby,
Yes again.
I'm sorry, Mayor Smith.
Yes, that resolution is adopted. All right, we will move along to ordinances. We have several first readings tonight, but I believe the first 6 are all concerning our new transient lodging ordinance. So I will have Ms. Eaton read the first reading, please.
An ordinance repealing Oxford Codified Ordinance, Section 1141.01C, accessory use provisions for all zoning districts in Chapter 1141, entitled Accessory, Temporary, Supplemental, and Environmental Regulations, and adopting new Oxford Codified Ordinance, Section 1141.01C, entitled Accessory Use Provisions for all zoning districts in Chapter 1141, entitled Accessory, Temporary, Supplemental, and Environmental Regulations.
All right, I will turn this over to Mr. Perry to sort out for us.
Good evening. Thank you, Your Honor. I also want to let you know that we've got Dr. Mark Tremblay from Farmer Business School also on the line too. As you all know, this has been an on-again, off-again project for several years. And the past year and a half, there's been quite a bit of work done. And so this has passed through the Planning Commission with a recommendation. And so we are bringing that recommendation from Planning Commission, which is primarily a zoning code text amendment. And that is what this is mostly based on. But because of the changes that were made to the business code, that is in here too. And as well as the property maintenance code, which in Oxford, that is the code that's used to enforce the rental property, property maintenance and inspection, the life safety aspects. So it's kind of a complete package. So those latter 2 things did not go to the Planning Commission, just the zoning. So I can share my screen and give you, I've got about a 6-slide PowerPoint presentation. I know we threw a lot of information at you in your packets and online. We're not going to go through all of that, but it is there as a resource if you need it between first and second readings, or if you have something you'd like me to touch on, or for Dr. Tremblay. So I will put up the PowerPoint and give you kind of a graphical overview of how we've gotten to this point. This is just a really high level overview, and we'll just do this presentation once before we get into the other ordinances. And this will actually address all of those ordinances. You can kind of see it all at the same time. And then as you go through them, we can refer back and I can answer questions. So this is just the recent history. This doesn't go back to 2015 and 16 when Planning Commission and staff first started talking about this. Those of you that are all on council now will remember the revisions to the business code, which if you recall, we asked for kind of a pause, and I think there was some hesitation on council as well on the zoning code amendments. And I just remembered before I proceed, are there any council members that feel the need to recuse if they have personal or perceived conflict with transient guest lodging use at their own property? Or
Yeah, I was waiting for an opportunity to wave my hand there. So as someone, a family who has rented out a bedroom in the past on Parents' Weekend, in the past, I've recused myself on all matters related to this legislation, minor though my interest may be. So yeah, I don't know how that works on Zoom, whether you can throw me in with the attendees or not, but I will recuse myself from this and the subsequent agenda items related to this matter.
Thank you, Councilor Prithridge. I apologize for the delay on that. Chris Conrad and I did talk about that in advance, and I think I forgot to bring it up. So I'll proceed. So in April of last year, the code was revised to require the registration. And what that did was that allowed us to begin the what we call the data capture. We didn't believe that we had an adequate picture of how much of this was actually going on in Oxford. And fortuitously, that led us to Dr. Tremblay, who was offered to help us with the research in a much more comprehensive way. So that is where that first bullet point is. And then we presented a summary of that in September and began to do a lot more research with Dr. Tremblay and student Jordan McMaster. And once we wrapped that up, that helped confirm some of the suspicions that we had. And we were able to write a much more detailed, after kind of reviewing what's going on with other Midwestern cities around the country and some cities in Ohio. There really wasn't much of a system that we could replicate. There wasn't really anything similar to Oxford that had the robust rental program, that was a college town, that was small. So this is really new territory. So what we brought to Planning Commission, which I'll show you on the next screen, addresses those different topics. And then we actually reached out to the stakeholders. And so fortunately, we had contact information for those that had registered, and we asked for comments, and we did get a handful of comments back. I think we got 5 comments, and we put those into, we responded to those, answered the questions the best we could, and we put those into the Planning Commission packet for consideration. We didn't actually get any interaction from those operators of transient guest lodging, but we did provide those comments, and that generated some conversation among the commission. So after we collected that feedback, then we went back with an actual text amendment, which is what you have in front of you tonight, with some minor tweaks. And Planning Commission did recommend that. There was some good discussion, which we'll get into. And that happened on August 11th. So this is an overview of the different code sections that I mentioned before I started sharing the screen there. So that first row is the zoning code sections. That the 1141, which is the first one, first ordinance, is all about the details of transient guest lodging and that threshold of 90 days maximum for those areas outside of the neighborhood conservation overlays. And then the zoning districts of all those that would need amendments in order to be updated, because currently there is a conditional use requirement that we have not been enforcing, if you recall, awaiting this project to proceed. And then in chapter 1159, those definitions that had to be amended. You might recall there was some discussion about the number of days. whether it was 14 or 30 to make that definition. And so that's in there as well. And then the business code needed to be amended again in order to have the terminology updated to reflect transient guest lodging, which is a term that actually Chris recommended because of its distinction from other rentals. And then the property maintenance code, which is the section that is the life safety requirements for the inspection that we would apply equally. So this is the transient guest lodging, kind of the crux of what Chapter 1141 amendment is about. And you can see that we have a distinction here on the neighborhood conservation overlays. We are, and Planning Commission recommendation was to allow this in single, 2, and 3 family dwellings, but there would only be allowed to be 1 booking at a time. And one of the changes that we made, which was a slight tweak since the Planning Commission meeting, was to make sure that no more than 1 of those units within a building that has more than 1 be used for this purpose. But those can count for that overall 90 days. So you could have each of the 3 units, if it is a 3-family building, used up to 30 days per unit, but they could not be simultaneously, for example. It would still be required to have a rental permit, but we would use that same permit for both types of use. So that just makes it more efficient for us, rather than having 2 separate inspections, 2 separate permits, requiring 2 separate fees. We're trying to avoid that to keep it simple. And the same zoning provisions, which would be in effect for neighborhood conservation overlays, would be in effect for these as well. And the new thing that is added here is that for those property owners that want to do this more as a business, there's a threshold of 90 days. And when it's over that, then it needs to go for a hearing. And those would actually be prohibited in a neighborhood conservation overlay. And this slide talks a little bit more about that and that conditional use permit process. The code language that you'll see and the ordinance for conditional uses talks about the context of the area, the neighborhood, the type of streets that are in the area, and as far as weighing and balancing whether that's a good thing to have that much usage as more of a business in a neighborhood. And the ability to revoke the registration is something that was an early request by the Planning Commission actually several years ago. If there was an issue that was documented and there were citations, then this would allow there to be a revocation of that permit. The Planning Commission recommendation was unanimous. There was a request to better clarify the difference between the principal use and the accessory use. That's that business use versus the homeowner that's doing it for extra income. So we did do that. There was also some discussion on the condominium, on whether a condominium would be allowed to do this just like a single family home. We wrestled a lot with that after the last Planning Commission meeting. Ultimately decided to not change anything in the code that we had drafted, but did decide it would be a good idea to reach out to the few condominium developments that we do have and let them know, hey, if this is something that's important to you as a condominium entity, as a neighborhood association, you may want to discuss this, because for those handful of developments like Applewood that have 2 and 3 units in a building, only one of those owners, since it's a condo, would be allowed to do that. So the next one would be denied that. And so rather than try to get into a situation where we're asking for an approval from the condo owners in advance, we felt it best just to leave it alone and just let them know what the code is. We don't have a lot of rentals in condominiums, so we didn't want to put a lot of effort into the enforcement of that, without much return on that investment. So that's where it landed. We did change a couple things in the wording. As I said, you couldn't have more than one unit in a building that is used at one time. So we added the phrase "at one time," and then we changed one word on the definition from consideration to compensation to make it a little more clear. But everything else is the same as the Planning Commission recommendation was made. But again, I think the big takeaway is the 90-day threshold. Planning Commission felt like that was a good balance. When if it's under that, then it would be allowed without Planning Commission hearing and discussion. If it's over that, then it would require that hearing. Looking at the data a little bit further, Dr. Tremblay helped us with that. That would actually capture about 75% of the existing short-term rentals, at least up to the end of 2019. I know it's been probably a quiet year for these, but that would capture about 75% of those. Now, whether or not those 75%, that 80 or 90 would want to go through the permit and the inspection process remains to be seen. But it would take a lot of work off the Planning Commission from having to do that many conditional use hearings, which is, I know, a big part of our effort here. Is we want to make sure that we're using our staff time and commission time wisely and getting some return on that big resource impact if we were to enforce the code the way it's written right now, which is just not feasible. So I know that's kind of a long version, but I hope that gives you a little bit of a landscape for these 6 ordinances. The latter of 2 are not actually zoning, but they're related. So happy to answer any questions. And again, Dr. Tremblay is here to answer more of the data dive type of things. This is something that he's been researching nationally, so it fit well to have him and his team working with us. Thank you.
All right. Let me ask if there is anyone from the public who would like to address this ordinance before council.
I do not see any at this time.
Okay, and I will add that Mr. Prithridge is allowed to address this as a member of the public if he should have a question.
So thank you. I'm going to address this. It's funny. I'm muting myself like I'm a panelist or attending, not a panelist. Anyway, David Prithridge, 6195 Contreras Road. I want to offer thanks to Sam for the many years and the Planning Commission for the many years work trying to strike the best balance possible with this. I think this is a compromise. It probably won't please everyone, which is usually an indication that it's good legislation. I think 90 days is quite generous for people to be able to not have to go through the conditional use process. And should they want to, then that is, if they want to make a business, a standalone Airbnb, as you guys know, affordable housing is a key concern of this council. And I think that this addresses this squarely. So I really do appreciate working through the process the slow way to get at the best compromise possible. So thank you.
All right. Now we can move on to council discussion. I see Councilor Ragu's hand raised.
And I know that other cities have had Airbnb kind of feed this data back to them so they don't actually have to gather all the data on their own. Can we do that with Airbnb to let us know whenever there's that 90-day limit, or how are we monitoring that?
Airbnb primarily works with the larger cities because they have the big budgets for their legal counsel. That's not something we're interested in. There is a third-party company that Dr. Tremblay used for the research. It's called AirDNA. And that's what some of the compliance contractors that have been wanting to sell us their service, essentially, which is the monitoring, Ms. Ragu, you're asking about. We haven't decided to partner with those yet. So we have a good connection and relationship because there are so many rental property owners that also want to do this for short-term usage. So with that in mind, I don't think we are expecting to see any compliance issues. But there are companies that have offered to do the compliance checks for us, and that's something that we could actually contract with them on a fairly affordable basis that would not require essentially suing Airbnb, which is not something we want to do with a $1 billion company. So I think we have some options available to us for our small market that would be affordable.
All right, I'm seeing Councilor Bracken's hand raised. Jason, for some reason, we can't hear you.
It says
Don't-
I'm unmuted.
There, now we can hear you.
Okay. I didn't even change the button. It must have just delayed. Sam, I was wondering if we knew how those third-party monitors actually get that data. Do they scrape it? Do they actually call? Do we have an idea of how they gather that?
Yeah, actually, Mr. Newland and I sat through a presentation a couple weeks ago, and they have some fairly scary methods of using algorithms and basically robots to screenshot, and it's all using public information. And they will take multiple screenshots per day of the Airbnb and VRBO listings, and they connect them to auditor records. So, and then they supplement that with the AirDNA data, which is scrapes of transactions on the lodging. So it doesn't have the personal identifier, but it has the location and the amount. So it's a really robust data set. It's not something we don't have computer programmers and algorithms that would have the time to do that. This company started in San Francisco, so obviously they have a vested interest in making that happen, and it has kind of grown since then. So I don't know if we would ever partner with them, but it could be an option available to us if we felt like enforcement was an issue that needed to be dealt with.
Thanks.
Yep.
All right, I see Councilor Southard's hand raised.
Yeah, I'm really delighted to see this come before us now for a vote. And I appreciate all the work, years of work. And I just want to remind the public that sometimes things take a long time, but that's because, it's done carefully and with good deliberation. I think this is really well thought out. I do want to ask a question that maybe is out of the area of deciding on this. This is so important for the safety of people who do short-term rentals. So we are talking about enforcement of various safety measures, but we're also talking about tax revenue. And so I was hoping we could have some idea about an estimate of how this is going to impact the budget in our community, because I think it's going to be very beneficial for the city. Isn't that correct?
Doug, would you like to take that one?
Sure. We've talked with council briefly about applying our hotel lodging tax, and I'll be working with staff and our attorney to bring forward some legislation. We wanted to get this first step done, make sure this was going to be in place. Obviously, if we can collect the full 6%, which I'm not sure at this time if we can collect the 3% convention tax, but we'll check into that. Right now, there's not much activity, of course, with the fact that Miami University doesn't have any events. The city's not scheduled any. But I think given some figures that were provided in 2019, it could be a very good source of revenue for whatever purpose that council decides. I mean, we had talked about maybe depositing money in the housing trust fund. I think we've also talked about maybe providing some additional money to Enjoy Oxford, because to this COVID-19 pandemic, they, like the city, have suffered revenue loss. So, we're not prepared to talk about that, but, once things get back to normal, I think it could be a substantial source of revenue, but we would have to decide how we go about collecting it and how we go about with compliance costs, what our compliance costs are. Not everybody's going to willingly pay it. So we'd have to do some sort of audit to make sure that indeed it's being administered fairly. I don't know if that answers your questions, but it's a work in progress.
Yes, it does. Thank you very much.
All right, I too want to echo all the work that's gone into this because I was part of it a couple years ago, and thanks to Mark Tremblay, the data collection and the presentation of that data, was outstanding. I think you covered everything and anything we possibly could have wanted to gather data on about those type of rentals. So, and again to Sam, your outreach to the stakeholders. Again, I think you did everything possible to get everybody's input on this, and I think it looks great. So, if we don't have any other questions, this is first reading. We'll see it again in 2 weeks. And we will still have to go through all the other sections with Mary Ann just because they affect changes to the different code sections. So I see Mr. Snavely's hand.
Just wanted to say that it would probably be helpful to council and to the public if maybe Sam could just briefly identify what each of these ordinances, what it's doing that's different from the rest.
Okay, we can.
Sure.
As we read them, I can have Sam point that out. That's a great idea. Okay. Then let's move on to the second first reading. Ms. Eaton, I think this is the most painful one to read, but whenever you're ready.
Yes, so please bear with me. An ordinance repealing Oxford Codified Ordinance sections 1143.01B1, 1143.02B1, 1143.03B1, 1143.04B1, 1143.05B1, 1143.06B1, 1143.065B1, 1143.07B1, 1143.09B1, and 1143.15B1, all entitled Permitted Uses in Chapter 1143 entitled Districts, in adopting new Oxford Codified Ordinance sections 1143.01B1, 1143.02B1, 03B1, 04B1, 05B1, 06B1, 0.065B1, 07B1, 09B1, and 15B1, all entitled Permitted Uses in Chapter 1143 entitled Districts, to be in compliance with Oxford Codified Ordinance Chapter 1141.01C entitled Accessory Use Provisions for all zoning districts.
All right, Mr. Perry, if you'd like to give a brief explanation of this one.
Sure. So our planner, Zachary Moore, who I failed to mention earlier, he's not with us tonight. He wrote and figured out this puzzle over the past year. So this ordinance that the clerk just read is what goes through the different zoning districts in town, particularly the residential districts, and reflects the change. So it has to be done because we have various areas around town where each one is regulated differently. And so this updates that to reflect the chapter that you reviewed in the first ordinance.
All right. Is there anyone from the public who would like to address this ordinance before council?
Mr. Mayor, Jessica Green stepped away, so I'm hosting and I don't see anyone raising their hand.
Can I chime in at one last time as a member of the public? David Prither, 6195 Contreras Road. We're at the end of a really long process, but I think it's bears, the people should understand what the council is doing here is legalizing Airbnbs. They're legalizing short-term rentals. So I've heard it said that city council is restricting. Why are they restricting this in a hard time? It has been an unregulated activity that's been outside the law. So I think that it's important just to note that this is legalizing it and providing some rules for the road so people understand why council is doing it. So thank you.
Thank you. Any council discussion of this section? All right, we will move on to the third ordinance. Ms. Eaton, you may read it whenever you're ready.
An ordinance repealing Oxford Codified Ordinance Section 1147.03B entitled Uses in Chapter 1147 entitled Conditional Uses, and adopting new Oxford Codified Ordinance Section 1147.03B entitled Uses in Chapter 1147 entitled Conditional Uses to be in compliance with Oxford Codified Ordinance, Section 1141.01C, entitled Accessory Use Provisions for all zoning districts.
All right, Mr. Perry?
Thank you. This ordinance is what will go into, this would go into effect if there is an application for a business class transient guest lodge or short-term rental in a neighborhood. So if somebody wants to have one in a neighborhood that is going to be going to be used more than 90 days per year, there are things that would be taken into consideration as far as how close is it to a major roadway, what's the character of the neighborhood, and so that way the Planning Commission can raise the expectations a little bit more because of the length, the number of days per year that would be used. So that gives that that discretionary approval. If it's just too much in that neighborhood, the council might decide through Planning Commission recommendation that this is inappropriate. But if there is an opportunity for it to be allowed, if it is found to be appropriate through this process with this conditional use chapter that you would be amending, they could actually set the day limit. So, you know, maybe it's more than 90, but maybe it's not 365, maybe it's 200. And that does involve the public, that if they would like to comment on it. If there are neighbors that feel that there are impacts, these are those situations where it's a very case-by-case situation. And that's the chapter being amended for that purpose.
All right, great. Anyone from the public who'd like to address this ordinance?
There are none.
Didn't think so. Any council questions about this section? All right, don't see any. Okay, we will move on to technically the fourth ordinance. Ms. Eaton, whenever you're ready.
Ordinance repealing Oxford Codified Ordinance, Section 1159.03, entitled Definitions, beginning with the letter B, and Section 1159.21, entitled Definitions, beginning with the letter T, and Chapter 1159, entitled Definitions, and adopting new Oxford Codified Ordinance, Section 1159.03, entitled Definitions, beginning with the letter B, and Section 1159.21, entitled Definitions, beginning with the letter T, in Chapter 1159, entitled Definitions, to be in compliance with Oxford Codified Ordinance, Section 1141.01C, entitled Accessory Use Provisions for all zoning districts.
All right. I almost feel embarrassed asking Mr. Perry to review this because I think it's just definitions, but.
It is just definitions, but definitions mean a lot. So the B is the bed and breakfast. That's one we already have. So this is amending it to modernize it. And then the big one here is revising the transient definition from 14 to 30, and then adding a new transient guest lodging definition, as well as transient guest lodging hosting platform. So it kind of expands on that. That's something we've never had before. And that's all. Thank you.
Anyone from the public wishing to address this ordinance before council?
No one.
Didn't think so. Any council questions on this section? All right, not seeing any. We will move on to ordinance number 5. Whenever you're ready, Mrs. Eaton.
An ordinance repealing Oxford Codified Ordinance, Chapter 743, entitled Short-Term Rentals, and adopting new Oxford Codified Ordinance, Chapter 743, entitled Bed and Breakfasts, Transient Guest Lodging, to be in compliance with Oxford Codified Ordinance, Section 1141.01C, entitled Accessory Use Provisions for all zoning districts.
All right, Mr. Perry.
So this is the business side of things, not zoning. And this changes from short-term rental to transient guest lodging. So it adds that new word so everything matches nicely.
All right. Anyone from the public wishing to address this ordinance before council?
No.
No. Any council questions? All right, we will move on to the 6th and final ordinance in this package. Whenever you're ready, Mrs. Eaton.
An ordinance repealing Oxford Property Maintenance Code, Section 310, entitled Rental Permits, and adopting new Oxford Property Maintenance Code, Section 310, entitled Rental Permits.
Mr. Perry?
Thank you again. This is remove some exemptions from the property maintenance code, which is the code that we use to enforce the rental inspection requirement. There is kind of an odd exception that is going to remain, which is essentially a house swap that was added several years ago. So that's not changing. It's just moving into the paragraph, but it does remove the exemption for short-term rentals not being required to be inspected, which is something that Planning Commission and staff were fairly adamant about. So this puts all those requirements consistent between short and long-term rental.
Great. Anyone from the public wishing to address this ordinance before council?
Nope.
All right. Any council questions on this section? All right, seeing none. Okay, we will move on to ordinance number 7. Ms. Eaton, you may read that whenever you're ready.
An ordinance amending ordinance number 3538, supplemental budget ordinance number 6, to make supplemental appropriations for fiscal year 2020.
I will turn it over to Mr. Newland.
Yes, this ordinance should look pretty familiar. We did a similar one back in July of this year. And the state released another 175 million of COVID funds, which is half of what they did the first one. So the city's portion would be half of what we got the first time, which is 214,432. And then we'd have an additional expenditure of the same amount of money. So we can spend the funds as they come in. The auditor's office, they should have got the funds on Friday, got deposited in their accounts. This is the end of the month, so I'm sure they're busy just like we are. And probably I'd hope by the end of this week or early next week, we'll get the release from the county. And we'll deposit it in the local coronavirus relief fund as we did the first distribution.
Anyone from the public wishing to address this ordinance before council?
No.
Okay. Council questions, discussion?
So this is just setting up the ability for us to deal with it, and we're going to be looking at proposals for that at a later time. Is that all correct?
Yes.
All right. This is a first reading, so we'll see this again in 2 weeks. And just so everybody knows, since this is a funding request, when and if it's approved at the second reading, it will go into effect immediately. So, all right. We have no second readings tonight. And as part of our announcements and communications, we are going to have discussion about our CARES Act funding. And I'm going to let Mr. Elliott introduce that, and we'll go from there.
Doug, you're muted. Hold on.
Forgot to unmute. Thank you, Jessica. I'm just going to make a few comments and then turn it over to Jessica. But as we know, the Federal Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, better known as the CARES Act, which was enacted on March 27, 2020, provides assistance to state and local governments. So Council basically passed a similar appropriation ordinance like you're being asked to tonight for a first reading. We did that back in July, on July 7th. And then July 16th, we received our first round of funding. We really didn't know the amount until that time. It was $428,884. And then, as you know from Joe's comments tonight, we're receiving a second round, which was basically half of that, or $214,432. So I'm going to turn it over to Jessica now. She basically collected a lot of information from our partner agencies, from council members, staff, and we'd like to present this information to you tonight and then have a further discussion. So Jessica, I'm turning it over to you.
Thank you. Mayor Smith, we do have a few people who might want to make a public comment on this. Do you want this now or after I go through my presentation? What would you prefer?
Let me think. How long do you think it'll take us to go through the presentation?
I'll be I mean, I'm not going to be super long, but I'm going to be a little bit. So we might want to let them go first, perhaps.
Okay. Then let's let them go first.
Okay. So Ms. McLean or Ms. Croswell, if you want. Okay. And go ahead, Ms. McLean.
Hi, thank you. I'm with the Oxford Community Arts Center, and my name is Kari McLean. I grew up here in Oxford, and I just started at Oxford Community Arts Center in February, right before COVID. In previous years, Oxford Community Arts Centers had about 18,000 people of all ages participating in our events and our classes and other programs. Obviously, due to COVID, far fewer people have been able to learn and grow and enjoy arts programming this year. And, you know, with COVID, the world has changed rapidly. That's had a significant impact on how people experience the arts. And it certainly accelerated the need for arts organizations to find new ways to grow and change and to meet the needs of our community. The arts have always been really critical in interpreting the times, and it's exciting to have this kind of opportunity for innovation in the area of arts and culture. But in order to do that here in Oxford, having the right equipment and staff resources will help us make it possible for children, adults, and families to safely find new ways of interpreting and expressing the times through the lens of arts and culture. So we would very much appreciate the council's consideration of our CARES request for live streaming equipment and funding to help us with tuition and staff resources. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so what I'm hoping to do is I'm going to do just kind of a brief introduction about how I requested information about the CARES Act spending. And then I was going to go through the Excel sheet that I shared with you in each category, then go through what we've expended already, and then share with you kind of where those totals are falling. If it's okay with you, I'll kind of go through it all at once, and then we can kind of have discussion and jump back to different topics. Is that okay with you guys? Okay, so that's what I'm planning to do. I want to go ahead and share my screen with you. Okay, so the first off is just what can the CARES Act funding be used for? And that is basic needs, educational assistance, public health, and economic sustainability. And then our allocation in total was $643,296.24. And where did we kind of solicit for funding requests? We went to city councilors and city staff, but also the Family Resource Center, TOPS, the Oxford Senior Center, Butler Behavioral Health, the Coalition for a Healthy Community, Talawanda School District, Primary Health Solutions, Chamber of Commerce, Enjoy Oxford, OCAC, Oxford Community Arts Center, and Lane Library. And almost everyone turned in, and I asked them to kind of submit a formal idea to me. And I didn't know how much money we had, so I kind of said, if you had 5, 10, or 20,000, not knowing the scale a few weeks ago when we started asking this question. And like all good nonprofits, they gave me that and then their pie in the sky dreams, which is good for you guys because that actually helped us when we did have more funding. I was able to then call them back and have conversations with each of these individuals to talk about the biggest maybe good and or bad thing is that the money has to be expended by December of 2020. And so I called each of them and said, how much could you spend by December of 2020? And we had some conversations. And then that is what I'm going to present to you next. So let me get that pulled up. And I'm going to start with basic needs. And I've organized this by organization, their item, the estimated cost, the estimated time frame for implementation, and then the Jessica ranking of is it feasible, challenging, or like really hard, green, yellow, and red. The first one was TOPS. They are asking for a refrigerated mobile truck to then deliver the food pantry out to areas in our community instead of having everyone come to them. And so it's a way to make food delivery more accessible. And they're asking for $42,000 for that. I spoke with the Family Resource Center, and they are asking for $60,000 for financial assistance for housing and utilities. Utilities including internet accessibility, because it is a utility right now, especially with children and people working from home. The cold shelter would be $30,000 to go toward a local hotel to help people who need transient lodging. And so that would be that category. $30,000 in transportation needs. This would primarily go toward car repairs for people who need a little bit of help to fix their car so they can get to work or places like that. And then $10,000 toward client eviction history and credit repair so that people can get new apartments if they've been evicted in the past. So that's a total for $130,000 toward the Family Resource Center. For Talawanda, they have their own CARES Act funding, but I did speak with them and said, well, what's not covered? And providing lunches to their preschool children was not covered under their CARES Act. And so they requested $5,000 for that, for a total of $177,000 for basic needs. The next category is educational support. And it's kind of the same organization, item, cost, feasibility. And the first one here is the Family Resource Center. And this would be childcare and education support services at $12,000. And I believe Brad said that this would be like a grant that someone could get to hire a sitter or a tutor for their child to help them with school. This Talawanda School District asked for $11,000 to help. They have covered mobile hotspots for all of their children in their school, but their CARES Act did not cover $11,000 of it. So they're asking if we can help. This would help them. The Oxford Community Arts Center, they asked for up to 20, but I went ahead and put in 10 to provide free tuition for virtual music and art lessons and live stream equipment to then host those events, for a total of $10,000 for OCAC. And then I did want to talk, I did have some just big ideas about could we offer free Wi-Fi in areas, or at least Wi-Fi in large sections of town, including Uptown, Parkview Arms, and the Oxford mobile home community. And I had an interesting conversation. Well, there's a couple of things that I did go ahead and mark this as yellow and red. One is, could we get it up and going by December? Would be a challenge. Two is when I spoke with the manager at Parkview Arms, and I said, well, what if we could do it just for you? You know, get free Wi-Fi for you at Parkview Arms. She literally said, oh, please no. And I said, help me understand. And she was actually very much, she said, if you had free Wi-Fi everywhere in town, excellent. She's like, but I don't want to be the one spot in town that has free Wi-Fi, because she didn't want to attract more people to loiter on her property or come hang out there as a place for free Wi-Fi if it wasn't citywide. And so and that was just a really interesting perspective that I hadn't thought of. And so I want to acknowledge that. And I also want to say I did not get a chance to speak with the mobile home community. But with that, I also spoke with a couple internet providers, and we could put everything toward free Wi-Fi in our community across the board, but it would take all of our CARES Act funding to do that. And so at this time, I've marked it as yellow and red, and I personally am not recommending that, but it's up to you guys. So if I could I go through all and do questions at the end? And then, okay, so that's where we are with educational support. Under public health, Butler Behavioral Health said that they could expand mental health counseling to 50 people for $10,000. And this would be targeted to our COVID first responders and our teachers and police officers and EMTs who might just need a little extra help right now. The Oxford Senior Center is looking to do like physical upgrades to the Senior Center, including automatic doors, safety barriers, and extra cleaning supplies for $11,000. Technology upgrades to allow for more interpersonal connection with some of their seniors who may not have technology, you know, getting people iPads and Zoom accounts and things like that. And then looking for transportation, this would be the purchase of a vehicle to help transport seniors around our community for a total of $46,500 for Oxford seniors. For the city, I put in, I'll admit to this, I put in $100,000 for a public restroom. I've been wanting a public restroom since I worked for Enjoy Oxford. I think our uptown is our living room, and you invite people there and then you say, go somewhere else to use the bathroom. And I put a large money there. The LCNB Bank is willing to work with us to use their bathrooms if we take over the maintenance and cleaning and liability. But we need to work that out. And or we could possibly rent one of those fancy restroom trailers with running water. So I put $100,000 in. That is a placeholder, and I did mark it as yellow because there's a lot of things to think about there. Then we have hands-free water bottle filling stations that we could put all around town for $20,000. This was Casey's idea with Parks and Rec. I personally love this. This would allow for reusable water bottles and also just not having to put your hand on we don't have any drinking fountains right now because they're not allowed by the Board of Health. And then we have intramural programming. This would be like gym rentals because Talawanda is not allowing any use of their buildings. If we wanted to have basketball, this would be working with Miami to host basketball. Additional cleaning to allow some of our existing restrooms to stay open at our parks areas. And then we had staffing for closing Main Street on Fridays. And we also had just, a lot of you would ask for extra staff for enforcement. And I marked those as yellow and red. And I'm gonna be honest, for hiring staff for enforcement, it would take us so long to hire them that I don't think we could do much by December. And so I personally am not recommending these two staffing categories. Under economic sustainability, for the city, I have expanded dining safety equipment. This would be for like alleys and sidewalks and things so that if we did do an expanded patio area, we could get like road closure signs and things like that. And then this is an idea. It would be for the gift card program. We could say $100,000 of that is a grant. And those gift cards would then be wiped out of our inventory and the businesses wouldn't have to honor those when they're resold. So instead of having to kind of do the money later, it would just be a flat grant to them that we would do. That's one option that we were kind of exploring internally. And then for the Chamber of Commerce, it would be $8,000 in patio dining expansion equipment, so helping people buy tables and chairs and umbrellas. And then advertising for local businesses and or hosting some sort of business support event this winter was their idea for a total of 138 under economic sustainability. And then what we have expended, I just got a message. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. What we've expended to date under public health, the city has purchased, and a lot of this has come in not all at once. And so over the past several months, we've purchased PPE. We have had staff do extra sanitation of city property and facilities. We've had to bring in extra staff to backfill quarantined EMS staff. We did bring to you the signage board at the last council meeting, the Let's Stay Healthy Together educational campaign, the video and the banners that you see uptown right now was that. Our Zoom subscription through December. And increased technology to allow our staff to work remote when we all had to shut down. That was those categories. Then under economic sustainability, we spent a little bit on the Red Brick Fridays, staff and supplies. And then to do some of the expanded patio equipment, we've done a little bit there already. And then finally, in summary, I just want to show you this 643 here is what we started with, what we've expended to date, and that leaves the 532, 361 left to allocate to wherever you decide you want to do it. And at first, when I was gathering these ideas, I thought we'd have like this huge discussion about where we could put things, and we still can. But what I realized is I was like, well, with cutting a few things, we might just be able to meet most of the requests that our partners submitted. And so I wanted to show you what that looked like, but this is just what it looks like, and we can change this. But under basic needs, I put the full 177. I put 213 under educational support, 236 under public health, 138 under economic sustainability. The total proposed is $764,025. And what I did is I subtracted that Wi-Fi, all three of the Wi-Fis, and I also subtracted the enforcement staffing and the road closure staffing. And we landed at the $529,525, which gives us a little bit of wiggle room. But that's what I call Jessica brain, and we can adapt that however council would like. So that was my speed version, but I'm happy to take your questions.
Okay, I'm gonna try to juggle these tiny screens. Let me get, I think Edna was first, and then we'll come back and get Chantel.
Yeah, I had a couple of questions. One is that today the governor announced that there would be special funding, and I don't remember how much it was, but it sounded enormous, for internet access all through the state of Ohio. And I wondered if, that obviously that's going to impact us if we get that funding. And that would be incredibly exciting if we were able to tap into that funding. And I wondered if you know anything about that. So that's the first question. And the second is that there was also an announcement that FEMA will no longer be funding face masks or hand sanitizers at all. So shouldn't we be budgeting for those kinds of things like face masks, hand sanitizers, and that sort of thing? And I mean, I don't know, I have no idea how much that would be all through town. And so those two questions. My third question is, I'm surprised we don't hear anything at all from the library. Are they not doing any programs for the public?
I'll admit that I was not able to follow up with the library, but I did ask them to submit an idea. But I can follow up if you'd like me to. I just didn't get a chance. And to your other questions, you know more than me right now about the Ohio funding for Wi-Fi, but it's awesome. I will research that right away. And then as far as PPE, we have a lot. And Joe also told me that we're not allowed to, quote, stockpile it. So just to summarize what I think I heard from Joe. So.
Thank you.
All right, let's come back to Councilor Raghu.
Jessica, I think this has been one of my happiest moments on council. I think you did such an amazing job, and I feel like this is what it looks like whenever you have a people-centered, people-driven budgetary process, and for it to be as transparent as it is and try to meet all these different demands that directly help people, I think is been really pretty cool. So thank you so much. And I think that, just like what Pat Mead said before, that Avondale is doing it. There's different neighborhoods right from our sister city in Cincinnati. And so I would be really curious, just like what Edna brought up with the governor's hopefully proposal, to have different funding for internet, that this is a utility. It's not a luxury. This is a necessity, especially in a pandemic and just in modern day life. So I'm really anxious to see Wi-Fi projects that would be citywide in the future, so that it lessens the difference between the haves and the have-nots. So I'm really excited about that. I know you put a ton of work into this, and this is awesome. And I think that if only our city budget could follow a process like this, I think that this is just fantastic. I'm over the moon happy about this.
Thank you.
All right. Anybody? Oh, I see Jason's hand. Go ahead. Councilor Bracken.
Thank you. I was wondering what the Wi-Fi entails. Is that just to build infrastructure? Is that infrastructure and the cost of the service for a year?
Yeah, so my best answer is the quick amount of research I did. Like, it really does warrant more exploring. I mean, this was like a 15-minute phone call, was that this would be kind of the like 4 access spots that would go into Uptown, 4 access spots at Parkview Arms, and then 4 access spots at the mobile home community. And then it would allow like just public Wi-Fi in those areas. And then I did call Cincinnati Bell about the projects in Cincinnati. And I said, how are you doing it? And they did like 2 entire neighborhoods. And I don't know the size of the neighborhood, so my apologies, but it took $500,000 to do both entire neighborhoods. And so the scale is very different, but if you want me to do more research, I can. And I don't know anything about what Councilor Southard brought up yet, but I would be willing. I mean, I am actually pretty passionate about closing the digital divide. It's one of my pet projects, but I would need to do more research to learn more. I don't know enough to answer your question all the way.
Yeah, this was just on the radio today, so it's very new news. And I think the governor was talking about infrastructure as well as hardware equipment, but both.
Yeah, so sorry, Jessica, it was still a little hard to parse out. So are we not sure what that entails fully, or is that just for the infrastructure? Or?
The 60,000 at each location was 4 wireless access points each. So 4, 4, and 4 that we felt like would mostly cover that area with free Wi-Fi.
Okay, for what period of time?
About a year.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
If I could jump in, the mayor might not be able to see me.
You're right. Yeah, go ahead.
Can I hop in?
No, go ahead.
First, yeah, I really do want to thank you, Jessica and Doug, for this kind of process for open solicitation. The fact that it yielded a number that was reasonable and that with some adjustments could be made is just super remarkable. So we don't have to parse difficult choices. And I think it was really creative on the part of the people who asked and of city staff. So I think it's really phenomenal. I would like to build on the other comments is that, like, I would love to see infrastructure improvements that can provide value beyond. And that's, for example, why I see things like the Wi-Fi as really being so essential. And I think we can resolve some of the questions that you talked about. I believe that if the question is about, well, why not center it on public spaces, at least at the beginning? And so it could be our parks, and one could provide Wi-Fi in and around Mary Day Park. You could provide Wi-Fi in and around the Uptown Park. And maybe that's just a way at the beginning to focus, that fairness issue, but if one could find a shelter at Leonard Howell and you could go and work outside or something, like that may be a way to strike that balance as we radiate outwards from public spaces towards something that's a little more comprehensive. I would really, really like to see us do that, because I just think the digital divide and mental health of getting out of your house and under your roof, I think is going to be another semester at home. I think people need to get out, and I think it has really great benefits. So my question is, do we have additional funding coming in? So will we be having a conversation about that additional money Joe was talking about then, like another $240,000 or so?
I think that was included in this proposal.
Okay. All right.
So I do want to say, not to like interrupt, but I think if we want to do public Wi-Fi, and I see Mr. Snavely, but we might have to decide either we do this proposal or we do public Wi-Fi based on the cost, but I can do more research and get back to you if you'd like. But
Well, I mean, I think that I wouldn't want to tinker with this budget too much because I think it mainly ends up right. But when I see, for example, I mean, I would like to see public restrooms in an uptown park, but $100,000, I might want to see that go to Wi-Fi more. And so I would play with some of those big numbers that are kind of on the bubble of the ask to see whether we can get to, and that could be, for example, a trade-off that a couple $100,000 in focused on public spaces might buy us a lot of Wi-Fi. I don't know. So thank you in advance. I do think it's phenomenal. I think we'll be able to spend this money in an impactful way.
All right, coming back to Mr. Snavely.
My internet is going back and forth, so bear with me. Yeah, I think the internet is a top priority, either from what Edna has described as a state program or what we can put towards it. One idea seems to me would be the community park, because there are plenty of parking spaces there, and it wouldn't have the problem that they have at, they were talking about with Parkview Arms. They don't want a bunch of people just showing up at their location. And I think the same might be true of the mobile home community. So that's just an idea to put out there. If we don't have additional funding, I would rather see it go to some of the other things that were very clearly related to issues that are affected by the COVID pandemic and that really help people. So, most of the ones from like the food bank and TOPS, and those were much more persuasive for me. So when we get to the final steps of approving this, I would like to know on some of them where it might not be clear, what is the connection to the pandemic? And so if we can make that connection clear, that would be great.
Oh, see Mr. Ellerby, go ahead.
First off, thank you so much, Jessica. And I can tell this is an enormous amount of work, and I appreciate it. I'd like to echo Mr. Snavely and Mr. Prithridge's thoughts about public Wi-Fi. I believe utilities will serve the most amount of people, and because Wi-Fi and just internet access in this current time is now, in my opinion, a utility, it would help the most people. I would love to see some semblance of it happen primarily or initially in the uptown parks, because that's where we currently have a lot of picnic tables and a lot of people that are socially distancing yet still being outside and gathering. Plus, it would help our local economy the most, just getting people uptown knowing that they have a free utility. But if we can radiate out from that, then I would totally agree with any of the city-owned public spaces being the next spots. Definitely the community park. There's also that other park that we had just renovated along with the athletes at Miami out past the mobile home park. I think that would be another prime location. It's not PVA or the mobile home area, but it could still serve them. And just doing the feasibility on those particular areas, probably uptown, and then maybe that area, and then maybe the community park would be my ideal order to get that implemented. But the rest of it is fantastic, and I really appreciate it.
Right, seeing Councilor Prithridge hand again.
So I have a question, and I hate to even ask it. Well, I hate to ask because it's the reality. Our conversations have been really focused about COVID prevention, and today really made me convinced we were going to have a containment problem on our hands. And I don't know whether that changes at all how we need to think about spending the money. I mean, I think we're going to have a lot more pressure on our medical system than we were hoping for. And so I just feel like today, looking at the numbers that came out of the Miami dashboard gave us some data on really just how difficult the situation we're in. So again, I don't know if it changes anything.
Yep. You're drifting out, David. You're fading out. We lost you. Can you hear us? We lost you. We still can't hear you.
You're gone.
Gone? Am I back?
You're back.
Okay, I'm sorry about that. Anyway,
More or less.
more or less. Basic idea, does anything about the current situation change our calculus? Maybe it doesn't. So just something to think about.
Let me see. Councilor Ragu, you want to go ahead?
Jason can go first.
Sorry, I couldn't see Jason. Okay, Jason, go ahead.
Oh, thank you.
Back and forth.
I was actually, so I also think Wi-Fi is incredibly important, but I actually take the opposing view of Bill and Glenn. So the reason we need it now more than ever is because people are teaching their kids at home. And that's not really going to happen in parks, right? You can't really do that generally. And also, the people uptown don't tend to need Wi-Fi. You know, just about everybody has a phone in their pocket that has access to the internet and can also set up mobile hotspots, right? That's not the area of need. The area of need is these outer areas where people don't have the same incomes and have to house their children through online schooling. And so I would actually start with those most in need. And then the last place I would put is Uptown Park, because even though everybody can access it, very few people really need it. And when they do need it, they're not going to be using it for schoolwork. They're often going to be lounging and getting lunch and things like that. And I have another question, but let's address this and then I'll come back to that later.
What I think I'd like to offer to do, because there's a lot of conversation about Wi-Fi, is I'd like to do a little, I just don't know enough to give you good answers tonight. So what I'd like to do is get solid research for you on the actual cost, like real cost, more than a 15-minute phone call, and then share that with you. And then we can have more information to base a decision on if that's okay.
That would be fantastic. And I think that's really important to figure out how much is infrastructure and then how much is going to be for actually providing the service and how much that would be for providing the service going forward. Because like everybody says, there's a huge benefit if we can pay for something that doesn't just help with COVID right now, but helps with inequality going forward and providing services. So figuring out all those details is really important. And also another thing, universality, that if we do put in the infrastructure, I think we need to know who can help us service that going forward afterward, right? Is that one company or can we shop around? Can we, you know, there's lots of complicated things. So I definitely appreciate it if you could look more into that. And thank you for all the work you've already put into this. This is great.
Can I interject some an idea here, because time is of the essence, and I think we all agree we want to help with the social service needs, the programming out there. I'd like to suggest that we move forward on our list for the basic needs and the educational support minus the yellow and the 2 red, as well as the public health. And we'll hold up on the economic sustainability, which is about 138,000, so that we can further research this Wi-Fi. But our thoughts, and I know this may sound like we're rushing it, but you know, we have to have this money spent by December 31st. And we have some people out there with some real needs, basic needs. And so if we could move forward with those other programs, we'll bring legislation in at the next meeting. We have the appropriation, and we'll bring in probably resolutions on each one of these agencies to provide them this funding so that they can move forward. It's going to take them some time too. And I think we all agree, we do not want to turn any of this money back. We have some, you know, some basic needs here and some other needs that we want to address. So just a thought.
Here, let me get Councilor Snavely first.
Yeah, in response to Jason's comment, I think the point is well taken about the schools, and my understanding may be inaccurate. But my understanding was Talawanda did not ask for that because they've already got their funding for hotspots to cover their students. So I don't think that from what I understood of that student students are the issue there. But I think food and shelter and those kinds of issues seem more important to me right now.
Here, let me go, Glenn, Chantel, and back to Jason.
Yeah, I'd also like to follow up on Jason's comment. The reason why I'm talking about Wi-Fi in the places that I spoke about was we already had line items regarding your concerns, and that was on that first tab, as well as what Mr. Snavely just talked about regarding Talawanda's CARES Act funding and us covering the pieces that they weren't able to cover. So it addresses those particular concerns. And if I was made aware of any issues with other basic needs like food or shelter that weren't already covered in the line items that were on the spreadsheet, then I would definitely point more dollars towards those things. But because they had already been addressed in the initial proposal, that is why I made my particular statement.
Okay. Chantel?
Jason, you look like you're chomping at the bit. Do you want to directly respond to that, or?
Only if you want me to.
I don't want to interrupt the thought if y'all need to talk to each other.
Yeah, I was just going to say, if that's the case and we think that schooling is totally taken care of, then I really don't see how Wi-Fi is a benefit for COVID. Also, outside of this, when that service goes away, that's still going to be the area that has the most need, and their students are going to need that regardless for all sorts of other educational things, even if they aren't doing online all the time. Like, there's no way I can cut it in which those areas don't need priority over Uptown, which is a pretty privileged area that has lots of access to internet to begin with, really, in my opinion. Thanks, Chantel.
My understanding of what's happening with Talawanda and the hotspots is that it requires the parents to fill out paperwork and then actually sign up to get it. So, I mean, we can see that there are definitely parents who aren't able, for whatever reason, or capable to fill out this paperwork to get their kids that specific need. So if we're just looking at maybe some shortcomings from that specific program, that is definitely there with the school district. And it's not, and we're not just responsible for the students, right? We're responsible for the parents, or maybe people who don't have kids that also have some inequities and inability to apply for unemployment or apply for a job or get any type of information from the internet. So we're responsible for those adults too. So I would definitely agree with what Jason's saying. And that was why in the original proposal that I sent last Friday, that why it should be centered in very specific areas that we already know are the highest density of need. And I also totally agree with what Doug said. You know, this time is of the essence. We need to spend this money. I think for the most part are all in agreement that basic needs are basic needs, and we want to make sure that that is first and foremost covered. And I think that, you know, I'm really excited to see where the Wi-Fi project is going to go, and that is something that, you know, in the long run, beyond this, you know, we should be looking for. And I think also to what Glenn said, you know, the Family Resource Center has already said some of their proposal of this money would go towards internet access and utility help. So I think that's very encouraging, and that also will be going to the people most in need, not just the students, but the adults as well. So if anything, I would say if Wi-Fi doesn't seem feasible, I would almost want to give the Family Resource money more money to help with internet access, because that line item seemed quite small. So I would propose giving them more for that, so that we can actually be needs-based.
Here, let me see if I can kind of craft this as to tell you what we were thinking and see if I can work kind of a compromise. So the thought was at the second meeting, we would come back with a resolution, and we can still do that on the things that we agree on, that we want to move forward with, so we can get this money out into people's hands. That'll give Jessica time to look into the Wi-Fi issue some more, and we can hold some of that money in reserve that is more agile or easier to spend, like from economic development stuff that isn't quite so critical. So if we need to shift that towards a Wi-Fi project, we could do that. Does that sound like the direction we want to go to everybody? Okay, I'm seeing lots of heads nodding that seems to be a way to go. Does that give Jessica and Doug, does that give you guys enough direction?
Yep. I'm gonna take all the economic development in the public restroom and move it into public Wi-Fi, and then I'll do research on what Ms. Southard learned about, and I'll get back to you. But everything else we'll prepare like a resolution for up to that organization as a grant.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank
All right.
you.
Anybody, any last questions or comments? Jason? Wait, you're muted. You're muted.
Sorry, yes, I have a few. So although we just sort of tabled part of it, I wanted to ask about the sort of gift card thing again. Is that just a redo of what we already ran?
Well, I think at this point we just tabled it to look at Wi-Fi. Is that okay?
No, that's okay. Do you want me to just hold off questions till we resolve that? Yeah. That'll probably cut it then.
Okay, I saw Councilor Southard.
Yeah, another matter that I think it's fair to bring up is that I've been working with the Senior Center on the idea of using their van for transportation to the polls, for early voting, for depositing your absentee ballot, and for voting on election day. And we're talking about trying to get funding for that. That is not from this funding. It's not from the CARES Act, but it is something that would benefit our community, that I've been interested in and that I've been working on with the Senior Center as a member of the board of the Senior Center. And because they have a van and they are enthusiastic about doing this, and we're working on trying to find the funding for that project. So I just wanted you to be aware of that. It is related to COVID because we don't really want people to be volunteering to take strangers in their private cars, but rather to be in a safe van where they can be, where the van can be sanitized and where they can be appropriately distanced. So it is related to COVID. It's COVID related, but it's separate in some ways. And I just wanted you to know about that's going on. And if you have any ideas about that, please share them.
All right, Councilor Perthuis.
And all the news that I was relaying about what the governor said, I don't have the details, and I hope that does come to our benefit too.
So I just wanted to say that, I was the one suggested taking the money from the bathrooms or the economic development, and I don't think yet we immediately want to say those are things that we're not going to do. I just think those are pools of money from which, if we wanted to expand Wi-Fi, that would likely be a source. But I think
You're fading out again. We're losing.
So.
Got your back.
Okay. Am I back?
You're back.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry. I think the Wi-Fi is important, but there will be a limit to which only we want to do so much. So, but you play around with the spreadsheet, come with a proposal for how best to spend the money, and we trust that it'll be a reasonable proposal, balance the needs.
All right. Jason, you got something else?
Yeah, I was just going to say, even though I wanted to prioritize the areas of need with Wi-Fi, I am absolutely not against getting universal Wi-Fi. And especially if we can look into how much it would cost if there's some sort of discount for getting something as huge as all 3 sections, that might be favorable to us.
All right. Okay, if nobody's got anything else, why don't we go on to regular announcements and communications, and I will start with Mr. Elliott.
Yeah, I just have a few things I want to share with you. There was an article in the Journal News today about Butler County making a push to count every citizen. And at the end, they threw in a few comments. I had a nice long conversation with Denise. She didn't quite put all the information in there, but as I've reported to you, our self-response rates are pretty low. But what's not reflected in the article is that that doesn't include the basically group quarters, basically the dorms. So when you look at that, and I know I've shared that with you, that we have some low response rates in a few precincts, keep in mind that that's only the self-response rate. They're out now knocking on doors and, to get the rest of the citizens, and they're focused on students. So Miami, we believe, used the e-submittal to provide information to the census. And they also, we hope, are providing information, name, date of birth, that type of thing, with the off-campus students, so we can make sure that we get a complete count. So I won't read to you. I'll send this email out that I received today from Carolyn Tepe, who's our partnership specialist with the U.S. Census. It's got a lot of good information here, and she also included the things that we've done. I know Denise well, and I think she already had the story written and just wanted a few comments. So, we're doing our very best working with Miami and the census to make sure that we get a complete count. I just wanted to point that out to you. And lastly, I wanted to share with you that the mayor and I were involved last week in a teleconference with Governor DeWine. He wanted to talk to the various university towns about how things were going. So it was Oxford, Athens, Bowling Green, Columbus, Dayton, Fairborn, Worcester, Youngstown, Cincinnati, Cleveland, Portsmouth. And so I shared with them, Mike and I shared with them the things that we've done here, and we listened to what other communities have done too. So of course we didn't have these numbers that Miami released today. I think Jessica, JJ, and I want to share with you that we had a meeting this morning to talk about our next steps. And so we Seth put together a letter that we'll be sending out under my signature to, for example, gas stations, letting them know we've had some complaints. We expect you to comply with this, and letting them know too that we may start fining them if they don't do a better job of enforcing it. So we're doing a number of things as best we can, but of course we're all concerned about the number of cases of Miami students increasing significantly this evening. They updated that. So unless you have any questions, that's all I have this evening. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Let's move around. Chief Jones, anything you'd like to add tonight?
Sure. I just want to respond to a couple things that was mentioned under the PCRC report. Unfortunately, I don't see many of them still on here. But I just want to make it clear and make sure that council understands and the public understands. It seemed that some folks were alluding to the fact that we had data and were withholding it. And I just want to make it clear that's not the case. We don't have the data. We need to develop a process for collecting that data. So, and that's what the recommendation from the PCRC was, is for us to, within that 6 months, get a process together and show them how we're going to collect it, which I think we've worked on with our traffic stop data. That's what we started collecting January 1. My goal would be to have a system in place, make sure they review it, and then start actually collecting that data on January 1 of 2021, so that we have a full year of that data to collect. So we are working on that with them, and we'll continue to work on that with them. But I just want to make sure that was understood. And, as Pat kind of said, we had many conversations about collecting this data over the course of time. And of course, I share with them the challenges of doing so, the reasons I may not want to do so, and whatnot. And so it wasn't until just recently that they made a formal recommendation. It's been discussed, and we've been working on collecting that traffic stop data, but we provide an enormous amount of data to the PCRC. If any of you are interested in looking at it, go to their board and commission website, and you can look at the data sets that we provide. And that's mostly on citations and arrests, things like stops where warnings are given. That's what we're talking about now collecting. And that's what we're collecting with the traffic stops, and in the future, working on those field contacts. And then the other portion, the business cards, If you watch the PCRC meeting, you'll see what our business cards look like. We do have on our business cards a way to provide feedback, and that's always been there. And we do give them out, but I think we can improve that process. I'm not going to go through that all tonight, but you can watch the PCRC meeting online, and that was discussed. And as Pat said, I think we're really, really close to being able to do that. So that's really all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Newland, is there anything you'd like to add tonight? I think he may already be gone. I see Mr. Woodell. Is there anything out there? Casey, you still there?
I am still here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so just a couple announcements. All this talk about free Wi-Fi. I've got a couple announcements I'll bring up kind of related to that. We did start our School by the Pool program this week. If you're not familiar with that, it's a program we started that allows students to go out to that conference room that we have at the Aquatic Center, and that is led by one of the furloughed employees from Talawanda. So we have a licensed educator who's on site all day with those students, making sure that they are completing their schoolwork, but also provides that childcare need that we know working families still have as they're back to work, but their kids are at home. So that started this week, and that will continue at least for the first quarter, and then we'll reevaluate based on what Talawanda decides to do, whether or not they remain virtual or they go back to school. And then yesterday we officially opened the Attic Teen Center, which is inside of the Tri. That was scheduled to open back on March 16th, which was the first day of full closure in the state of Ohio. So we've been waiting to reopen that, and we did yesterday. And that also has free Wi-Fi that teens can show up and use at after school hours. So that's open from 3 to 7 during the week. They can use the Wi-Fi, they can play games, they can play air hockey. It's kind of a social opportunity, but we are enforcing the requirements of masks and distancing and things like that while they're there, and capacity limits. So just a couple things that we're continuing to do within the restrictions that we have. So yeah, thank you.
All right, thank you. Chief Deathridge, are you there? Is there anything you'd like to add tonight?
I am here, but I don't have anything to add. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Okay, we'll go to Jessica Green. Jessica?
Thank you. I don't see Mike on tonight, so I just want to get really excited about the next phase of the Oxford Area Trail. And it's going to be opening officially by the end of this month. And so we're planning a virtual celebration and also kind of some hiking challenges that people can do over the course of a month. And then Sam might speak to this, but we are also working with Butler Regional Transit Authority on a joint RFP for the Amtrak design. And so that went out today. So hopefully we can get some good proposals back. And those were my additional updates tonight. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Mr. Perry, anything you have to add tonight?
Thanks for mentioning that, Jessica. To follow on, Your Honor, with Doug's comments on the census, I did want to follow on that those census workers for the non-response follow-up will be out knocking on doors through the end of the month. So if you happen to see someone out, they have 2 forms of identification. They've sworn to protection of people's information and all of that. They carry a messenger bag that says U.S. Census very boldly. You can see it from a long distance away. So yeah, that's through the end of the month. There's also a housing study that's going on right now. Most of that is being done through the internet and phone to property managers, landlords, some of the nonprofits. But if you do happen to hear about that and you're asked, is that credible? Is that a city study? Yes, it is. So thank you.
Thanks a lot. Ms. Eaton, anything you'd like to add tonight?
Nothing tonight. Thank you.
All right, I'll go to Mr. Kennard. Anything from the law director?
Nothing further, thank you.
All right, we will just go around the horn. I'll start with Councilor Ragu tonight.
I think that the most exciting thing about this discussion on the CARES funding is that we're looking at ways to directly help people and also try to figure out how we can stop evictions, homelessness, hunger, things that we know can perpetuate the cycle of poverty that can be inherited and then also trying to reduce crime as well. So I think that it's really important as we go forward, whenever we look at how can we best address certain things, whether it's mental issue or intimate partner violence or drug abuse, what can we do that actually fixes root causes instead of something that we're always reactionary towards. So I think that, you know, just like with our budget, the money is there, but the way that we prioritize the funding of it can be vastly different. We say affordable housing is important. You know, our budget should reflect that. And as of right now, it doesn't so much. So I'm really excited about, I think that this was the 3 years I've been on council, this has been the most like special way of really engaging the public and engaging the people into how we allocate our budget. And I just thought it was a beautiful thing and so heartwarming. So I hope we can do that in the future as we reprioritize the way that we spend our money.
All right. Councillor Ellerby.
I'd like to once again thank both Sam and Jessica and, you know, all the Oxford staff. They've been doing a tremendous job during a year that's been, well, we'll just call it a fecal extravaganza. But, you know, to the citizens of Oxford, you know, this pandemic is real. And the best way to get through it in this town is wash your hands, wear a mask, use the social distancing, and just try to be considerate of your fellow man, because you don't know if they have an underlying condition or if they have some other issues or if they have loved ones at home that could have those issues. And just respect the people that are out there working to provide you some semblance of normal everyday life, because those people also have to go back to their families. So just, you know, try to respect everybody and what they're trying to do, because all the stuff that we're up here trying to make these decisions to make Oxford the best place it can be right now, you guys have the biggest part. And I just want to reiterate that again, like this is pretty serious stuff and we need to take it seriously. So be excellent to each other.
All right. Vice Mayor Snavely.
Yeah, I think the report of Miami University on their dashboard took a lot of people by surprise in town that it was that high. I think most of us on council all predicted that that was going to happen when all the students came back. And I think it's going to be accelerated when the rest of students come back to on-campus housing. So I think I agree with Glenn's comments. I think that we really need to all continue to be socially distant and using the masks. I think that people the last week, just from my casual observation, have been doing a better job, and maybe it's because the seriousness of it has hit people. So hang in there, folks.
All right. Councillor Southern.
Well, I want to thank our law department for their excellent sunshine laws workshop today. And since that was taped, it's on YouTube, I guess that can be used for anybody who was not in attendance and who might like to refer to it. So, and I suppose it can be used in the future. I thought it was really excellent. Thank you very much for doing that. Thank you, Chris and Ben. It was very wonderful. And I also want to, we've already talked about the census, which is so important for us. So if you haven't filled out your form, please fill out the census form. And please buy gift cards. Normally Doug, our city manager, mentions this, but he didn't because he had other things to talk about. So I will mention the gift cards. Please buy gift cards and use them and support our local businesses while staying safe. And I also want to say that as the sponsor of the initial ordinance for the PCRRC. I am so pleased to see the good work that they're doing. And thank you, everybody, for that. You know, we do want to be prepared for the future, and we want to protect our citizens. We want to continue to be a welcoming community. We don't ever want to have bad situations in our town. The most recent murder of Jacob Blake in Kenosha reminded us that, you know, no longer will we think of that suburb of Milwaukee without thinking of Jacob Blake and his murder. And the name Kenosha has now changed. I don't ever want to see that happen to our wonderful town. In addition to that, and that's, you know, a segue to the fact that early voting starts on October 6th. And of course, election day is in November, so November 3rd. So everybody please vote and continue. We must continue to try to make a difference locally and nationally. Thanks.
All right. Councilor Bracken.
Thanks. I wanted to use this time to put my 2 cents in. If Wi-Fi should not work out for us, to consider more the impending eviction crisis and maybe putting money towards that, but also childcare. Casey was kind enough to talk about the program they've developed that provides safe, spaced out childcare. And childcare is such an equalizer when it comes to wealth inequality and lack of resources. I would love to see money going there if we can't go towards Wi-Fi. So just wanted to put that out there, and I would just echo the comments of everybody else on council. That's all I have.
Thanks. Councilor Prithridge.
Hopefully my Wi-Fi will hold up. So yeah, I think that I feel like we entered a new phase today when we saw the numbers, which we suspected would happen. We were hoping for the best and trying to prepare for the worst. I think those numbers are low. Anecdotally, decent percentages of the people in my class have them, or whole houses of people have COVID. So we have community spread in Oxford, and it's significant. So I think we are in a very risky phase right now. And so we had reporters calling us saying, all right, what's the city going to do next? I think we've done up to a certain point. I don't know what the answer is next, but I think probably COVID and updates about COVID should be regular agenda items for every meeting for upcoming months. Because I think the public, via, for example, Oxford Press, Oxford Observer, gets a lot of information from our meetings. The community learns a lot about what's happening at Miami from our meetings via the Oxford Press, Oxford Observer. So I think if we have, even if it's a brief agenda item, that we could provide some update, maybe not a huge discussion, but I would ask staff, and I would ask us to think about what could additional steps be if, for example, the community spread is significant. I don't know what the next step is from municipality. We've done the large gatherings ban, we've done the masks. In the spring, these kind of conditions, lesser conditions, led to stay-at-home orders. I'm not floating anything. I'm just saying that I think that we're going to be in a perilous phase, and I don't know what the answer is, but I think we have to keep talking about it and try everything we can do to keep people safe, because I think it's widespread enough now. We live in a college town with enough college students that the risk can be found anywhere you go in public. So anyway, I think we're doing a great job. I'm very proud of what the city has done. I just think the nature of it is such that it's here now, and we are a hotspot. So thank you to everyone, and thanks to all first responders and other people who are out there amongst an infectious population. Really thank you, and look forward to our next meeting.
All right, I just have a couple of quick thoughts. I too want to thank our first responders, particularly our EMTs, because I know Thursday, Friday, and Saturdays, you're making runs to specifically help Miami students who we know are most likely carrying the COVID virus. And it does keep me awake at night if we were to have to quarantine a significant number of our firefighters or EMTs. I also want to give some praise to the police department. You guys are doing a great job under a time when we're asking you to do more than ever and you're scrutinized more than ever. I've heard a lot of compliments, even from the student body, that the officers are doing a great job of education with them in lieu of necessarily writing them a big fat citation. So I appreciate your discretion where it's needed to cite and not to cite. And you have my full support in everything you're doing. Lastly, I'm going to make a call out to Miami University. We've loaded the bases for you. I need you to speed up your adjudication process. I'm an alum. I'm allowed to say some students need to be suspended or expelled for endangering their population and our population. You need to make an example of a few of them so they take this seriously. And on that happy note, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Snavely, second by Mr. Prithrick. I thank you all again for another great meeting, and I look forward to seeing you all.